Hello there, I'm Drew,
I'm Becky.
and we're talking about Arya's hero's journey today. So basically, we've been doing this podcast for a while about Game of Thrones, you and I, and you obviously a professor at the great Kennesaw State University.
Woohoo!
So you've noticed like the common tropes that happen in fantasy or with heroes or with just basic characters, the hero's journey, which I've heard kind of like from Tolkien or from Lord of the Rings or from the Canterbury Tales. So explain to us what the hero's journey is.
Well, the hero's journey was actually not created by, but uncovered and discovered by a man named Joseph Campbell, who was an English professor in the mid 20th century. He died not all that long ago, although he lived a very long life. I should have looked that up. But he started studying when he was a young professor and scholar all of the myths that different cultures have. And he started looking for, because he started seeing these commonalities between them. And so he basically wrote about what was already out there and the things he saw that myths have in common, even from culture to culture, cultures that never had contact with each other necessarily. And one of the ideas that he wrote about a lot was the hero's journey. And it is so common, even if you don't know what it's called exactly anymore, you would totally recognize the hero's journey, mostly because it's what George Lucas based Luke Skywalker's character's arc on. And in fact, George Lucas talks about when he was first trying to write Star Wars, he was having a lot of trouble finishing it and couldn't quite figure out what to have happen to Luke. And I don't know if he was talking about just the first movie. My guess is he was talking about really the whole idea he had for the first three movies, which were the middle movies. But
Very complicated.
Yes, it's way too complicated. But the first ones that came out, when some of us were children and some of us were parents were children, or their grandparents were children. But
I'm not that young. Come on. Go easy.
Some of my students are. Some of my students, I could be their meemaw. So he wrote about, George Lucas has said that he was kind of stuck on what to do with the character of Luke until he read some of the stuff about Joseph Campbell and his ideas about the hero's journey. And it told him exactly what to do with Luke. So even if, like I started saying, that even if you're not really familiar with the hero's journey as a thing, or if you've heard the term but don't know exactly what it means, you certainly are familiar with the idea if you've ever seen Star Wars or so many other stories in movies, TV shows where there's a character arc where someone is a hero, and then books for that matter. I mean, Neil Gaiman has written books with this sort of arc over and over and over again, and it really never gets boring because you can have your own spin on it. But it's been very interesting to me to think about Arya and her journey through the whole series as a hero's journey and compare that to the steps of the hero's journey that were described by Joseph Campbell in his many works.
Gotcha, because it is a very common theme of the hero who starts out as a little child and then hears great tales of wonder and then goes out into the world. So I've heard like kind of Lord of the Rings style where like Frodo goes through trials and he has a break and he has a reprieve, he has a resting time, or of course like Luke Skywalker as well. Like he's a little boy and then he started off wanting to be something, then he became something by the end. But in the hero's journey, is that so? How about you explain what kind of like the character? Because there are a lot of tales throughout the world. Like dragons exist in multiple cultures, and like they're kind of. I think one of the I think Steven Spielberg. That's definitely his name. He said there's basically like only 7 stories. And
Yes,
like rags to riches, revenge, blah blah blah.
Right.
And the hero's journey is kind of one of those kind of archetypes / kind of grand plot things that can happen to most characters, or we can at least predict happen to most characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's true, that there are probably only a handful of stories, and it's just how deftly you can retell them that can that same story be interesting again or not. But the hero's journey, although it's the version, or not the version, but what Joseph Campbell wrote about is very, very detailed and a lot of steps. Something does not have to meet exactly every single one of those steps to be considered a hero's journey. But there are some basic parts of it that
because most cultures don't include, like, there's this guy named Ned Stark and he dies.
Right.
That's
right.
never the grand
right.
hero of Kutul Khan or whatever. It never ends like that. So it's like, of course, these nations never were in contact with each other, but they still had an idea of what a good story was. Like, and then he died of tuberculosis. The end.
Right,
like,
the end. That's all the romantic poets all died of tuberculosis. But
that's why the romantic poets wrote something better than, oh, he died of tuberculosis, like I will, because I live in like 1400s where I'm going to die of dysentery in 3 years. You know?
Oh yeah. Please let's not. I've been doing a lot of genealogy lately and seeing a lot of tuberculosis and whooping cough and stuff as cause of death on death certificates. I don't really want to think about that.
Disease being the cause of death. What?
Yeah.
But how about you explain now Arya's steps throughout her journey?
So the basic steps because somebody can be a hero without going on a hero's journey. Okay, it's not necessary, but the steps for something to be a hero's journey in big, broad terms are departure, fulfillment, and return. And those basically mean they are called off, departing their home to go on a journey. And then fulfillment, they fulfill what they were supposed to fulfill on their quest, because this is usually considered a quest, even if not for an actual physical material item, but for something emotional or some sort of fulfillment. So they have a quest, and then return, where they return home or die. Sometimes return means death, but they have fulfilled their purpose. So, like I said, there can be plenty of heroes. Like I do think, for example, Jaime Lannister is a hero within the story of Game of Thrones, but he did not have a hero's journey. And Arya definitely did. I think more than any other character, she comes closest to fulfilling this departure, fulfillment, and return idea. And each one of those then has other, you can find graphs and charts. And like I said, Joseph Campbell wrote books about this, covering the details of what all a character can go through. But those are the big three things for a hero's journey: departure, fulfillment, and return.
Gotcha. And like we'll kind of course, this is a podcast episode, a shorter one most likely, is going to be over Arya Stark. But you can make that kind of comparison to anybody like in the show. But like Arya in particular has certain things where, like, I think you mentioned in one of your charts, you have a lovely piece of paper in front of you where it's like it states like departure, magic hero, magic sidekick,
right,
stealing faces, and then all that. Because like Arya, I mean, Jon came back from the dead. Does that count as a return? He returned back to Winterfell and then from the dead, and I guess that kind of counts. But Arya in particular has had like. So explain to me, like the paper in front of you, or whatever you just want to go through Arya step by step. So Arya, of course, in season 1, she departed from her home in Winterfell. Right. She kind of had a goal. Like we've mentioned this in our last wrap-up cast of the season, that like her goal was to not be a lady, which she achieved. So like when she departed, she kind of had the goal of to be a warrior and to become a cool, independent woman, which is, I guess, her main goal. Because she never said she wanted to be like a warrior or an assassin, but she just didn't want to be a lady. So how do we go?
Yes. So she was far more interested in shooting arrows and
throwing cats and catching cats.
Yes, and catching
decapitating
cats
pigeons
and fencing and all of that. The thing about the departure, though, in the hero's journey is sometimes the hero knows. They don't know, oh, I'm on a hero's journey, but they know that they are departing on a quest. Sometimes, though, they don't know. One of the things that happens a lot in stories to start a hero down that path is they will follow like an animal or some creature into a forest, and then they're lost, and that puts them on their journey. I think in the case with Arya, she was young and didn't know she was setting out on a quest. And the quest can be for something internal, like for growth of the character, or like I said, for something material that actually exists, or that they think exists. The Holy Grail is a good example of that in the King Arthur stories, the quest for the Holy Grail. But in Arya's case, her departure was not something she set upon on purpose. Unlike with Luke Skywalker, when his purpose, as soon as he gets R2-D2 and he sees the recording in there, he knows he wants to go help the princess, right? So he sets out on that journey, even though he doesn't know how to fulfill it.
So I wonder if Joseph Campbell, what's his name?
Yes.
If he has been able to like diagnose the difference between like a hero's journey where someone knows what their goal is, like Lord of the Rings, where it's like my goal is to take this ring to the pit of Mount Doom, versus like Arya, which I feel like Arya was always in the back foot trying to feel like Arya's like, okay, I'm gonna go to my aunt in the Vale. Oh, the Hound's dead. I will go to Jack and Hagar, and then I'll go to the Fray. And I'll go to Cersei. Hey, you know what? I'm gonna go to Winterfell instead. Like, I feel like, there's a destiny that can happen in a hero's journey like Frodo, where it's like I have to do this one thing, and that's it. I'll fly on the back of a griffin and get there in 10 seconds. But for Arya, I feel like she's been kind of not loosey goosey, but it's more interesting where like she doesn't have a destiny where it's like, oh, she will definitely kill the Night King in season 8. No one saw that coming, So like she's been kind of not loosey goosey, but she has been more undeclared of what. Like, it's almost like she's a college student changing her major back and forth. She's like, okay, I'm going to do this and then do that. Maybe do this, maybe do that later on.
Yeah, she definitely didn't know where she was headed. And I think in retrospect, we can see that where she was headed all along, for me at least, was to kill the Night King, and that everything that she did led up to that moment. And the show has had Bran say that kind of thing to a couple different characters about everything that you have done has led to this moment. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. But I also think then within her arc, because instead of just one big story, this story is very complex and has a lot of other smaller stories within it. And it would probably be possible to go through and break down the various seasons and how Arya's arc worked during those seasons. But I think, so there are smaller journeys within her larger journey. But I think for her, in terms of the departure, she definitely didn't realize she was going on a journey. She didn't realize it was any kind of, that she was setting out to be any kind of hero, or that she would become any kind of hero. So her departure, yes, she left home. That's the first thing that happens to happen with a hero's journey. The hero leaves home. So she leaves home in the first season, and she gets to King's Landing, and she talks to her father, and he's willing to have her start her dancing lessons with her dancing master. And that really starts her down the path of her hero's journey. But another big part of it that has to exist for it to really be a hero's journey is some sort of supernatural type of help from the gods or from the supernatural in some way.
I was curious about that, because like a hero's journey can be as simple as like, oh, George Washington becoming the president, but it is more like hero's journey is more like a fantastical kind of plot thread, right?
Yes, because it's tied to myths. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Like Odysseus never, like it's not like this is the real story behind Odysseus and his story of the Odyssey. Like, no, he was a weird guy who punched a centaur in the face, probably. Like, it wasn't just like a guy on a horseback. Like, he literally fought like gods or whatever because it was a myth.
And gods intervened to help Odysseus many times.
Yeah.
So he's sort of, other than Luke Skywalker, he's the other quintessential hero's journey that I think of and that students are often familiar with when I cover this. But yeah, having some help from the supernatural, and maybe also having supernatural on the other side against you, which Odysseus also had, because Odysseus isn't, not to get too much into the Odyssey, but a
very simple book as far as I'm aware, right? Very simple, very straightforward.
Yeah, it's not very complex in my opinion. Actually, it isn't. Like, I read it the first time in 9th grade or something. It's long, but it's not hard to follow. It's pretty straightforward. But there's a lot that happens, and so basically gods are fighting over what should happen to Odysseus, and to some degree, not entirely, but to some degree, he's a little bit like a pawn to them. Whereas Arya is definitely
since there are no gods in this world, apparently, weird fire-breathing women who can just cause fire from nothing
and just kill everybody.
So because there's no gods in this world, because Davos said, "Oh, Lord of Light, who cares?" And Tyrion's like, "I bet if you think about that, audience, you'll never feel any better or any happier."
Yes.
So like, do you think it's weird for like Arya to be like, the help of the god of death, who says, "Not today," to the god of death, but that's just death. So like, all of her magic stuff, she wasn't really helped by anyone except basically herself.
Oh, what about Jaqen?
Jacquin.
Yeah,
He did blind her, made a waif beat her. Was he a mentor? He kind of was helpful.
Okay, well, let's go back even further than that. Let's go to her dancing master, because I don't think it was ever fully explained. Was her dancing master just a regular man from Bravos? Did he actually get killed at that moment? I mean, that was sort of one of those dropped threads, something that I kept thinking would come back. And then I saw some theories that the dancing master, and Jacquin, say his name one time for me so I can say it right. Jacquin,
Miss Cindy, Jacquin.
No, don't stop. No, I'm
Jacquin. It's
Jacquin Hagar.
It's like a weird British girl name where it's like Jacquuen.
Yeah, the spelling is unusual, but okay. So we're talking about the guy at the house of the many faces or whatever it is. But at any rate, her dancing master, there were a lot of theories that perhaps, or a lot of people who thought that the dancing master and Jacquin were the same person. We certainly don't know that for sure. We do know, though, that her dancing master was the first person to start to teach her anything. So even if he was not in some way a supernatural character, certainly Jacquin was. And I think that even though she's the one who escaped and helped Jacquin let them out of the wagon when the fire was burning and saved them, which meant that he owed her 3 lives, that was definitely supernatural help to her. Not just after she tracked him down later and went to Bravos, but at that point, that was something that he was involved with her in a way, because she would have died when Tywin would have uncovered her.
All of her plots and stuff.
Yes.
So, and it also is, I can see another plot thread of the hero's journey, that they have a guide, they have a mentor.
Yes, they have a lot, usually more than one.
More than one, and
right.
It's the kind of thing, because a lot of hero journeys start when you're young, or when you're like a child, like Luke Skywalker, where like Luke Skywalker was able to learn stuff from other people around him, learn life lessons, learn from a weird green guy.
Yeah, the weird green guy being the most important, probably.
Yeah.
And being supernatural within that world, even.
And then, like, there are callbacks where, like, Luke Skywalker's like, hey, I can do this now, whatever. So, like, Arya, you know, she learned from Syrio Forel. It's where she learned all of her kind of classic sword stances. She learned from the Hound to fight dirty. She learned from Jacquin to steal faces and not follow orders. She learned from Dany to get free horses.
Right.
She did other stuff, you know?
Yes, yeah, and because mentors, you're right, are a very important part of it, and the mentor can be someone who has supernatural powers, but also someone who doesn't. So it doesn't really matter if the dancing master had them or not. He was really her first mentor, unless you want to go with Ned, and I kind of think that's a different sort of thing. But Ned turned her over to the dancing master, Syrio Forel. And she goes off, and you're right, she learned something from everybody. So that's another part of the journey. They don't just go out and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to fulfill this main task that I have to fulfill. They have to fulfill a lot of other tasks first.
So yeah, with that part of fulfillment, is that like for Odysseus or for Luke Skywalker, does that fulfillment, like, is that their destiny, or is that the thing they kind of want to do with their life? Or is that, because, like, you know, Frodo's destiny was to throw the One Ring into Mount Doom or whatever, but that's not what he wanted. So, like,
right.
So it's like also another classic hero's thing of, like, you can't always get what you want. Sometimes you have to do something for the greater good, which Arya didn't do. She's like, maybe I should have killed Dany for the greater good. I'll let my brother do it.
No, I put on the little study sheet that I pass out when we talk about this, usually in world literature, the line from the Rolling Stones, you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you'll find you get what you need. And that is very true of the hero's journey. So sometimes they know what their ultimate goal is, and the tasks are things they have to complete, much like Frodo, to get to that ultimate goal. Sometimes, though, they might have one ultimate goal in mind, but that's not really the thing.
Yeah, because like a twist of fate and destiny, like Arya thought maybe her destiny was to kill Cersei, but she specifically in season 7 went back to her family in
Yes.
Winterfell, and that's when she got the Valyrian steel dagger from Bran. So that means, like, she thought her destiny, or at least what she wanted on her list, was to kill Cersei, but having loyalty and, like, kind of another good plot line for her is, like, trying to find family anywhere. She literally goes back to the family she has, and she tries to, and she goes back there, and she ended up killing the Night King. So it is kind of like that Rolling Stone thing. You don't always get what you want, which is a spear through pregnant Cersei's neck. We're like, oh, cool, is that okay? But she went back to Winterfell and won the day. She killed the Night King, so...
Because sometimes, like I said, you think you're looking for a material item like the Holy Grail, or you think that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, part of Gilgamesh's story is he goes looking for this plant that is supposed to give people eternal life.
Like Tangled?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen Tangled?
No, I'm sorry.
What myth and religion? Gilgamesh is
Epic
that?
of Gilgamesh.
Is
It's the oldest written story that we have, really. It's from the best described, I guess, as Mesopotamia. Samaria. It's actually old Samaria, and it was found on tablets.
Oh, gotcha.
And we don't have the complete story. But just last year they found another couple little pieces of some tablets that are part of the Gilgamesh story, and but it's sort of the original hero's epic. And
but they don't know how it ends. How do they know?
Well, it didn't just like the beginning is all there and the end is what's missing. We know like the tablets are broken into pieces.
Is the finale of Gilgamesh's epic tale could be him tripping on a brick and breaking his neck? Like,
that's right.
That was a good story back then.
Absolutely, yeah. And D&D wrote it, and nobody was happy.
Double D's.
So it's in his case like that. What he thought he wanted was eternal life, and what he found out was that what he really needed was love.
And that was kind of the fulfillment of Gilgamesh, you said, or
yes.
But for Arya, it's a little bit strange because you can say that her destiny and all of her training, all of her lessons, all of her mentors was learning how to kill the Night King and saving the whole world. But then after that, I guess if she died, it would have been kind of the end of her story. But since she decided to become Arya the Explorer, or whatever, and sail west of Westeros, is that kind of like her finale? Ending, like, because like a hero's journey can end with like someone's death, or at least the fulfillment of their destiny, like Luke Skywalker killing Darth Vader, maybe, or restoring balance.
Yes.
So Arya restored balance towards the god of death and everybody. So I guess just like her sailing away is her main ending, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, I think that her journey, everything that happened to her was to lead up to her being able to kill the Night King and save the world. I mean, she truly was a hero, but by doing that, it also meant that she basically could fulfill her own wish, which even though it wasn't really expressed at the beginning because she was so young, it was expressed, as you pointed out, just as I'm no lady, I don't want to be a lady, but it gave her the ability to then be independent.
And have freedom to choose what she wants to do for the rest of life, and sailing away and dying of scurvy is what she wants to do.
Yeah, apparently.
Hopefully not
maybe
scurvy.
They know maybe they stopped in Dorne and
maybe
got some
Yara will kill her
oranges.
because she wants revenge.
No. But she definitely didn't know that she was on this journey. And the other thing about it, though, is like, say, when Gilgamesh goes off to try to find eternal life, he promises his people, I'm going to bring back this plant for eternal life. So when he comes back without it, they're not exactly happy. So that can happen too. But he understands, and eventually the people understand too. And so I think in Arya's case, the whole destiny of saving the world was on the shoulders of this little girl who, when we first meet her, is like 11 years old, and that ultimately all of the things that she does and all of the little individual trials she has to overcome, whether it's the moments such as when the Hound takes her outside of when they come to the Red Wedding just shortly after it happens, and she wants to just go after people, and he saves her from going after people at that point, even though they aren't really friendly yet. But he knows enough to get her out of there. And so that's sort of a trial, and she learns something from that, I hope. And I think that for me, that was in the last episode the next to the last one, the penultimate episode, where the Hound talked her into going back, and she actually realized in that moment what she didn't want. That was as big as realizing what you do want sometimes, I think. And then once she saw all the suffering that had been inflicted by Danny, that was sort of more of her personal growth, and she could understand that even though what I wanted her to understand was that she needed to marry Gendry and go be the Lady of Storm's End and have lots of babies, I understand that was not where she was headed. Mm-hmm. And you know what would have been awesome, though? If she had gone off to explore and Gendry had just been there beside her and said, forget Storm's End, I'm just going off and we'll just be Bonnie and Clyde. Well, that's probably a bad choice.
That'd be cool.
But anyway.
There's no cars in this world. It'd be fine.
Right.
But
so anyway.
Sorry. That's Thelma and Louise. Never mind. not Bonnie and Clyde. There's no cars going off the edge of the cliff. My bad. But we mentioned in the podcast too our last cast about the finale. That's weird for Arya to see all this suffering caused by Danny and not to want revenge. Even though the Hound literally just told her like 10 minutes beforehand, before she saw that suffering via Danny, to not seek revenge because it ruined your life. So I guess I wish there was a moment where like there's so much stuff they could have talked more about the finale, made it like 3 hours long. But I wish Arya had a talk with Sansa where she's like, I don't want to seek revenge anymore. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have the weight of the world on my because she had the list of killing Cersei, and that's like when she was like only 12 in season 2 or whatever. Like you can take that as like a wish list or like. She's not willing any longer to have like the whole world on her shoulders of like only I can kill Cersei, only I can kill Ellen Payne,
exactly.
Only I can kill the Hound and not Gravity and Fire. But I think it would have been nice to hear her say that. That way we kind of get a restitution or resolution of everything.
I think it does leave a lot up to you to fill in, and I'm not sure they were totally successful with it, because I did see people, I may have said this in the last episode, that people I saw who complained that Arya didn't have much to do because ultimately she went there, she didn't kill Cersei. And so it's hard sometimes in a visual medium to reflect that kind of personal growth that's going on inside. And I really didn't get it either until I thought about it, because of the way when she's walking through the burned town, and like you pointed out, when she finds the horse and she's just riding off like she is hell-bent on revenge, but then that was never explained.
Maybe looking back we can read that scene differently. Yes. Where she's like, this white horse represents my freedom and future. Time to ride away into the sunset.
Right.
Oh wait, I'll just ride back to talk to John for 6 seconds.
I need to talk to John for a minute. But I definitely think she rejected something in that moment with the Hound.
Yeah, when he told her to just stop killing people, or what do you mean?
Right. Yeah, when he told her that, and like you said, she realizes that maybe she doesn't have to be the only justice in the world.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good, decent end for her character, because we talk about it's hard to tell and speak in words and lame exposition that Brienne forgave Jaime, that Arya has this change of heart.
Right.
Because Brienne writing in that book is pretty sappy. It's pretty heavy exposition way to explain that.
But far better than a conversation.
Yeah,
though.
But at the same time, this show has had so much time in seasons beforehand to really draw out Jaime's point of view.
Yes.
Jaime, if Jaime had that 5-minute conversation with Edmure Tully in season 6, where Jaime explained I love Cersei. Make fun of me if you want, but that's who I love. Arya could have had a 5-minute conversation with Sansa in the nail salon or wherever girls hang out.
No.
Oh yeah, how dare I? Sorry, they were archery. I don't know, whatever Sansa does. And Sansa could say, "Oh, you don't want to kill every bad guy in Westeros anymore, all the bad evil men." And she's like, Arya says, "You know what? That's not me."
Yes.
My classic catchphrase.
Right. That would have been great, though.
I can do what I want.
That would have been great. Right. No, that's not me.
So overall, that's kind of Arya's main hero's journey of she did kind of all the characteristics, because the hero's journey is pretty classic with a character starting out young and filling out their destiny and journey, all that kind of stuff. So we got departure, fulfillment, and end. Would you say was that word?
Well, the return. The hero doesn't survive. They fulfill the task, but they don't survive. So I mean, that's like every ridiculous movie where somebody has to, that's okay, even Armageddon. I don't know why this came to my mind, but Bruce Willis, sorry, spoiler alert.
Armageddon is a 10 out of 10
movie.
amazing piece of cinema. How dare you?
But Bruce Willis stays behind by choice to die so that he can save the world, really, literally, in that movie. So sometimes the hero either chooses to die for the good of everyone else, or dies in the effort and succeeds in saving everyone else, but dies in the effort. And I think, but not always. Then you have the triumphant return home, and I think Arya definitely had that. She's
the Night King Slayer
right.
now. But it's weird because like Arya she sacrificed kind of her non-good thesis about her life because she decided just to leave. So it's kind of a weird way to read that, because her destiny was killing the Night King, and then she just left because like the final thing that a hero can do is sacrifice himself or like kind of just end, you know?
Yes. But you don't know what other thing, but that gave her the freedom, like we said, to do with her life whatever she wanted to do with her life. And when she returned home to Winterfell, she had already gotten all of those skills, mental and physical skills she needed to fulfill her destiny, her mission. And once that was fulfilled in terms of the people, in her mind, she still had another mission, right? She still had to kill Cersei, but that wasn't really what was meant to be. That wasn't her journey.
Yeah, and then she just realized like she can be free. Like the Hound is the best example of like one, like, you know, Bran's had some vendettas against Stannis Baratheon, for example, and the Hound has had a vendetta against his brother for his whole life, and she's seen what that can do to people for all their like journeys for revenge and stuff. So she's like, I'm a person now in my life who I'm not a lady. That's not me, and I can choose what I want to do with my life. And I think that's what she always wanted. And that's what she got in the end.
Yes, she wanted the kind of freedom that women didn't have at that time. It seemed impossible for her, because even Ned says to her in the first episode or second episode, you're going to grow up and be a lady. And that's when she first says, that's not me. And so ultimately, I think she is obviously the big hero of the show. I mean, she killed the Night King, and I do think that
humanity.
She saved everybody. And so while I totally get all of the criticisms of the way that things ended, I think if you look back over what the show did with that character over time, it's really pretty amazing. And maybe later on people will be not quite so upset and understand that maybe these stumbles, and they might be significant stumbles, don't take away from the fact that they had basically this 11-year-old girl who was hiding away from her family because she was climbing trees at the very beginning of the show is the one who saves the world. It's really, when you talk about subverting expectations, that's a big, that's subverting expectations right there when you're introduced to these people in the first episode, like Ned Stark and even Robb and Jon Snow.
Also the fact that like we wanted her to settle down, like you said, like it's pretty fan theorist to be like, I want her to settle down with Gendry and have adorable babies and stuff. But she was consistent with her character, and they're bloody subverting the whole genre here. But like someone like, a lot of 80s movies end with like, and then we married and had kids and happily ever after. But like people can live different lives and they can do stuff, because it's their freedom to choose that for their lives. So I think it wraps it up for Arya. Anything else to say?
It does. No, I think it was really an awesome and different kind of way to take that young female character and have her become the hero, really, of the whole show. And so I hope people will see that.
I mean, everything that happened in the last season, I'm sure Arya's not on the top of everyone's most angry list unless they're like misogynist or something.
That's true. I mean, most people I've heard are pretty happy with how it turned out, except for, like I said, people saying, well, but what was the whole point? Why did she have to go to King's Landing? Why was she there? They wasted her. But I think if those people will slow down and think about it, they will see.
She got a free horse.
Yeah, she got a really badass horse. But I think people will think about it and see that it was sort of the final step in her growth, in her own journey. And so that's how I see it.
Because like she's not Jon Snow where she's trying to save everybody. Like she was there to kill Cersei, not for the people, for herself mostly.
Yes.
So, but Maisie Williams always killed it, by the way. Like,
yes,
the fact that, like,
absolutely.
you know, I feel like Sansa was maybe not the best kid actor in the world in, like, the first season. But I feel like Arya was pretty fun and consistent, kind of like, yeah, but Dad.
Yeah,
like,
I think she was really good from the beginning.
But she was always kind of charming and endearing, and, like, John, her relationship was always good. And I think she killed the role in general.
Yeah,
and I think she did an awesome job.
I do, too. And I love that particular story, and I think, you know, that maybe teasing some of this stuff out is what people will do in the years from now, you know, going forward, where they think about the show and maybe rewatch it. And
because you said multiple times that, like, Lost ended so terribly that I doubt on reflection you thought it was any better. But luckily we can look back at Arya, and we might do a few more short episodes about this, perhaps about Jaime and about the Hound or something like that in the future. Because we do plan to do a huge wrap-up cast of, like, the whole series, which hopefully won't be that long, because there's not a lot to talk about there. We'll have a whole 78 hours of this TV show.
You're not going to make me watch season 5
You
again,
have to watch
No, I
everything.
will not watch. And I will not watch Theon be tortured, and I will not watch Sansa be tortured by Ramsay. And, there are certain things I won't watch again.
But hopefully we'll get the chance to do another Hero's Journey episode, or lack of, for some characters.
Yeah, or some, right. I mean, because like I said, not every hero is on a hero's journey. And, you know, then we could always, there's a lot of things we could talk about. We could talk about Bronn.
Indeed, girl Bronn of the Blackwater. Well, I'm Drew.
All right, I'm Becky.
Goodbye.
Bye.